Why is stakeholder satisfaction important? And obviously, with you being muted, that's sort of a rhetorical question. A number of years ago, there was a popular joke that was floating around that went, or at least had as a punchline, this job would be great if it were not for the customer. And I think you can also throw in the word stakeholder there. Perhaps at the time it was a little funny, but if you actually believe that, I think we all would agree that that would be suicidal. All jobs have customers. All jobs have stakeholders. All jobs answer to someone, whether you're an artisan or an engineer, whether you believe that what we do, especially in the IT world, is craft or engineering. It doesn't matter. There is always a customer. What they think affects what they spend. And I think that's an absolute. You just put a period after that, and if you get nothing out of this presentation, and remember that, and that's new to you, then you've benefited. Now, I will admit, in this webinar, I've used the term stakeholder and customer interchangeably. I've actually done that with a very common conscious focus, or at least forethought, so that we can understand that they are, in many cases, very similar tools. And I'm sorry if that makes some of you anxious. I'll keep trying to draw it back to the word stakeholder, but in my estimation, there aren't a ton of differences. For all practical purposes, the terms are synonymous. Everyone is a customer with all the baggage that word entails. Everyone is a stakeholder and has a stake in the success or failure of what you do. Now, you probably didn't expect this, but what I'd like you to do is to take a sheet of paper and draw a line right down the middle of it for a second. And on the top of one column, I'd like you to write the word stakeholder, and on the other column, I'd like you to write the word customer. And then what I would like you to do is to take a few seconds as I walk through these instructions to write down the groups that you think belong in each column for your project. And I'll give you a few seconds to think about that and write some things down. You can continue writing down as we go through the next few slides. As we go through the presentation, I'm going to come back to this a couple of times, if for no other reason than to give you some actions to take after this webinar is over. So not only did you probably not expect to, other than to maybe take notes, to actually have something to do during the webinar, you probably didn't expect to get homework. Of course, I'm never going to know whether or not you did the homework, so it's probably okay. So, overall agenda, we're going to focus on talking about this topic, stakeholder satisfaction, customer satisfaction, in sort of 4 acts. Why do we care? And I think we've started that conversation to begin with. Who is your customer? And we're going to reflect on the fact that there probably are multiple kinds of customers, multiple kinds of stakeholders. What do we really want to know? That's having worked in marketing, market research, along with process improvement for a long time. I'm actually amazed that actually tends to be a question. But it is. And very frankly, I think what we want to know is probably a subset of what we typically would ask. We would typically ask more than we really want to know, or we'd go about it in too circuitous of a manner. And then we're going to really head-on tackle how do you measure customer satisfaction. And all of these are going to be focused on a premise that if you actually are going to measure, and if you're actually going to ask these things, that you actually do something about it. For those of you who know me on this webinar, you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I am a proponent of, if you're not going to do something with the data, don't ask. You can always go back and get it when you need it. That's not don't ignore it, but you don't need to be off collecting it for a lot of reasons. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So why do we care about external customer satisfaction? And for those of you who are anxious about the customer satisfaction stakeholder word, again, I would suggest to you that just going to your project charter, if you have one, finding the page that has stakeholders or relevant stakeholders or some other word isn't really a good idea. We, external customers, is where I typically hear that world partner, we don't have anything to do with the real client. My client really is Jane in marketing, and her client are the salespeople for the commission system, as an example. Or, I only write software, and there are just too many steps in between where I am in the food chain and the kid in his dorm room playing the game on his PS3 to matter. Therefore, I only have a short-term vision. I'd like to suggest that it does matter. And what matters to you should be directly related to what the salesperson in the first example, it's important to them. And if it were my brother Nicholas in his dorm room, what's important to him as he plays his PS3? Why? Because your customer in the long run pays the bills, all the bills, because selling a current customer to your organization is a lot more efficient than selling someone else, because in the long run, all customers can change services, and happy customers promote your organization. Now, the question will come up later is actually, can we measure their satisfaction with what we do, and is it relevant? But at this point, you still need to understand what their needs and pains are so that you can tie what you're producing to them. So it isn't just a moot point. It isn't just something that's vacuous in terms of what you think customer satisfaction is. Why do we care about internal customer satisfaction? And when organizations, especially projects, wrestle with customer satisfaction, stakeholder satisfaction, they're generally focused on internal customers. So it's really easy for us to say, I understand why this is important. In reality, the reasons to care about internal stakeholders is not very different than external stakeholders. The point of view tends to be more personal, and the reaction to dissatisfaction more intimate. And I think that's important. And that's important in a society where people can take direct actions. Again, why do we care? Because your internal customers pay your bills, either directly or through interdepartmental relationships. That's how funding gets done. Because in the long run, even internal customers can change who are servicing their needs. Lots of organizations change who services their needs because of dissatisfaction in terms of what they're getting out of project teams. And that is, in many cases, a big reason for changing who services. We're all working for the same organization.